I was 3 hours into a quiet cycle when the console lit with the oldest kind of noise, a beacon that shouldn't still be broadcasting. The signature belonged to a Thren Assembly research hull, listed in every registry we carried, as decommissioned 11 years earlier. Ships that are decommissioned don't send anything. This one had sent nothing for over a decade, and then, for 6 minutes, it sent everything it had left. I run medical on the Corvena, a Terran relief vessel, crewed by 11, built to carry the wounded and nothing else. We don't escort, we don't patrol. We go where a signal points, and we do what we can when we get there. The station was called, on what paperwork survived the years of neglect, the Cradle Vault, a bio-research platform built to grow something the Thren Assembly Directorate of Continuity needed, and did not want anyone to see grown. When we docked, the air inside was recycled past its limit, the corridors dark except where our suit lamps found them, and the lower ring, a containment level, still had power running to exactly one cell. She had wedged herself into the corner farthest from the door before we ever reached her, dragging chain and monitoring leads with her like she'd done it 100 times, anticipating a door opening that never meant anything good. I want to describe her honestly. Dermal plating the color of wet ash, eyes a deep amber that didn't blink the way ours do, a build clearly meant for combat, and just as clearly starved past use. Grown, not born. That much was written into the file fragments I found later. Cradle Directive, Asset Ver-6, not a name. A designation, followed by a number, followed by a program that had apparently decided the asset was no longer worth the resources to keep alive. She spoke the Thren trade tongue, which our translator caught in pieces. The first full sentence it handed me was, "Leave, before they finish what they started." I asked who they were. She said it didn't matter, that I should take my ship and go before the consequences meant for her landed on me instead. She said it without pleading, the flat way you'd warn a stranger off a live wire, practical, resigned, already certain I'd listen. I didn't leave. I knelt down instead, at a distance she could tolerate, and told her, through the translator, haltingly, that we were a medical ship, that I intended to treat the burns on her forearms and the fracture along her lower ribs, and that I'd need her to hold still for about 4 minutes. She held still. The burns were old, layered, the kind that come from repeated exposure rather than a single accident. Testing scars, I understood later, not battle wounds. The fracture was worse than I'd first read it, a hairline that had been walked on for days, because nothing on that station had been willing or able to set it. I worked slowly, narrating each step before I did it, because every time my hands moved without warning, she went rigid in a way that had nothing to do with pain tolerance, and everything to do with bracing for something else entirely. I have treated frightened patients on a dozen worlds. I had never treated one who flinched at gentleness the way she flinched at gentleness, as if kindness itself were the part of the procedure she hadn't been warned about. Behind me, my crew worked the rest of the cell, cutting the chain free link by link rather than forcing the lock, because the lock's failure mode was rigged to alert something upstream, and running a portable scrubber to clear the air enough that she could breathe without the mask. Nobody spoke above a murmur. Nobody made a show of it. That, I think, unsettled her almost as much as the treatment did. A room full of armed strangers, behaving as if there were nothing remarkable about simply doing the job in front of them. Every hour after that, she seemed to expect me to change my mind. I could see it in the way she tracked the door instead of my hands while I worked, the way she flinched less at the dermal regenerator than at the sound of my footsteps approaching. Whatever had been done to her on that station had trained her to expect one thing reliably, that kindness ran on a schedule, and the schedule always ran out. On the second day, our sensors caught a Thren cutter inbound, transmitting standard reclamation traffic, a decommission unit, dispatched, it turned out, the moment that 11-year silence had broken into a 6-minute scream. Someone in the Directorate of Continuity had decided that if Asset Ver-6 was still alive enough to call for help, she was alive enough to require final closure. She heard the transmission before I could explain it to her. She told me, flatly, to release the docking clamp and go, that this was the consequence she'd tried to warn me about, and that the Corvena carried no weapons and had no cause to be caught inside it. I told her we weren't leaving. She asked me why. Not urgently, genuinely, as if the idea hadn't occurred to her as something a person could simply choose to do. I didn't have a clean answer. I told her the truth, that we'd come because something on that station had called for help, and I wasn't in the business of deciding, 6 hours in, that the call had been a mistake. The cutter held position 200 meters off our bow. Its commanding officer hailed us on an open channel and read out, in the clipped cadence of someone reciting policy rather than making a decision, that the Corvina was interfering with lawful reclamation of Thren Assembly property. I told him she wasn't property under active treatment, she was a patient under medical hold, and a Terran relief vessel does not release a patient mid-treatment for any authority, on any world, under any registry. I said it once, plainly, the way you say something you intend to keep saying for as long as it takes. He asked what I intended to do if he sent a boarding team. I told him I intended to keep treating my patient, and that his team would find 11 unarmed medical staff standing between them and a woman still healing from a fractured rib, and that he could decide for himself what kind of report he wanted to file afterward. There was a long quiet on that channel, longer than I expected. I've thought about that pause more than almost anything else from that mission, the sound of someone on the other end weighing whether erasing one inconvenient asset was worth becoming the officer who ran a hospital ship off its own docking clamp by force. Behind me, I heard my crew go still, in the particular way people go still, when they've decided, without discussion, that they aren't moving either. Nobody armed a weapon, because we didn't carry any worth arming. Somebody simply closed the outer hatch, quietly, and stood in front of it. I didn't order that. I don't think anyone did. It happened the way a held breath happens, all at once, without a signal. She watched all of it from the cot, her lead still trailing, and I remember the look on her face wasn't fear anymore. It was closer to bewilderment, the specific bewilderment of someone recalculating a fact she'd treated as fixed since before she could remember choosing anything for herself. The cutter broke position without another transmission and did not come back. I don't know what internal accounting made that decision for them. I only know she watched it go from the observation port with an expression I hadn't seen on her before. Not relief exactly. Something closer to disbelief recalibrating itself in real time, like a number that refused to add up the way she'd always been told it would. She stayed aboard the Corvina through the rest of her recovery. Somewhere in the third week, she stopped tracking the door. She started, instead, tracking the small things. The rotation schedule, pinned outside sickbay, the particular way our cook burned the second pot of coffee every cycle without fail, the names of the crew, which she learned faster than any patient I've had before or since. She asked questions the way someone asks who has never been permitted to before, carefully, like each one might be confiscated. What is this room for? Why does no one lock the door at night? What happens to a patient here once they're well? I told her, the first time she asked that last one, nothing happens. You get to decide. She sat with that answer longer than she'd sat with anything else I'd told her, and I understood, watching her, that it was the strangest sentence she'd ever been handed. On the morning we finally released her from monitoring, she asked our translator to step outside, and it did. Then she said something to me directly, in her own tongue, without waiting for it to be rendered into words I could keep. I don't know what it was. I've asked twice since, gently, whether she'd tell me, and both times she's only said that some things are heavier translated than they are said once, and that I should let this one stay hers. I let it. I still don't know what she told me that morning. I only know I've carried the sound of it ever since, the way you carry a debt you were never asked to repay. Not because I'm owed an answer, but because whatever she said it like someone finally certain that this time, the kindness wasn't going to run out on a schedule.